All right, I'm in the Gospel of John chapter 8, and I'm going to start out in verse 12. And I think I'm going to be making my way to verse 16 in this particular message. Now, what is happening here is that this is the day after the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And in the previous message, there was a conversation between Jesus and the Pharisees about the woman who was caught in adultery. And I explained that it really wasn't about adultery. It wasn't about go and sin no more. It was about the Pharisees trying to entrap Jesus using the Mosaic law, and he just simply turned the trap around on them. That's what the argument was about. All of the other arguments were about their own individual laws that they had established that created a lifestyle or defined a lifestyle, so that as long as you follow these laws that they established, as long as you live by this lifestyle, then if you succeed in following their rules, then you will supposedly never come within the boundaries of violating the Mosaic law. This was the one time that we have recorded that there was a discussion between Jesus and the Pharisees concerning the Mosaic law. All of the other discussions were about the other laws that they had established, that they had defined. So this was a unique circumstance. But then they walk away, all right? They or at least they start to walk away, and they're walking away from the oldest to the youngest. That's found in verse 9. In verse 9, then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the oldest even to the last. And I explained in the previous message the great significance about that, especially in this culture at this time, and how that would have been really perceived by the people there. So they were walking away. Jesus has a brief conversation with a woman who is just left there with him, as she's probably a little bit stunned that he managed to save her life, especially in the midst of the sin that she had obviously committed, that God saved her life. When he's the one, by his own finger, wrote the commandment that this is out of bounds. We don't do this, right? And so that was an experience for her. She considered him to be Lord. She recognized him a little bit for who he was. Therefore, we could say that she became a believer through all of this, which is, of course, a much better result than if she would have been executed. I think from God's point of view that this would be better. All right. Going down to verse 12, then Jesus spoke to them again, saying, and he says, I am the light of the world. I'll come back to that in just a moment, but I want you to try to get a picture of what's happening here. All right. He's in the temple. He's doing his thing. And these leaders, they bring this conflict to him. All right, that's all it is. It's just a conflict. They bring this conflict to him. They confront him and they say, in effect, Jesus, we're going to have a conflict and we think we're going to win this one. All right. And so they brought this to him. He resolved the conflict and they were walking away. But the way that he says this after his brief conversation with the lady, the way that he says this is to say, wait a second. Now hold on. Hey, we are not done yet. Come back here. All right. So they approached him saying, we're going to have a conflict. And then they walked away and said, oh no, we are not done. No, there is more to do here. Not only do I have the victory, but I'm going to cash in the capital of this victory. He's going to get some value out of this one. All right. If they wanted to pick a fight with him, so they did. So be it. But this time he's going to cash in, and he's going to cash in big time. All right. And he's going to benefit in a big way. So when he calls out to them, he's in effect saying, we are not done. This is what we're going to do next. All right? And what he says is, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. That's all he says to begin with, right? He said, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. And you people are walking away from me. You're walking away. And you are the ones who are going to be in darkness. Now, this is not about pride. All right? This is not about somebody saying, I'm right. It's not about that. It's about this is just the way things are. This is the design of God. This is how he designed things. This is how he structured things. There is the truth and there is the lie. There is darkness and there is light. Now let me start out from the physical point of view, and then I'll go to the spiritual point of view, because we really should divide both so that it's easier to understand the fullness and the magnitude of what he says in this one statement as they're trying to get away from him. You know, they're trying to get away because he won, all right? So they're just trying to get away, and he says, no, we are not done. You come back here. You come back. He says, I am the light of the world. Now let's start with this with regards to the physical context. Okay, now this was the day after the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And as I explained briefly in the previous messages, there were two ceremonies that really defined the Feast of Tabernacles. There was the ceremony of the outpouring of the water, as water was brought from the pool of Siloam up to the base of the altar in the temple compound. This was done daily, every day during the festival. And I explained the significance of that with regards to the healing of the man who was born. No, I'm going to explain that in just a minute. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That is what's coming. What's coming is the healing of the man who was born blind. That's the next chapter. All right. Sorry about that. I got ahead of myself. So you've got the outpouring of the water, and I'll be explaining the significance of that shortly. All right. But here we have the last day of the festival, and this had to do with the ceremony of the lights, or the ceremony of the lampstands. Okay, that's what this statement really is a reflection of. It has to do with the ceremony of the lighting of the lampstands in the evening, as the festival was coming to an end, because the day starts from evening to morning, and this was the evening that was coming, and it would be the day after the last day of the feast, which was a Sabbath day, and this would end when there were 3 stars visible in the sky from Jerusalem, just to get all the technical issues correct. And when this would happen, the whole temple compound was filled with large lampstands, and these lampstands were filled with oil, all right, olive oil. And they had wicks in these basins of oil that were set up on stands that were propped up, and they would ignite these in the temple compound. And there were so many of them that it would illuminate the entire community of Jerusalem. That's how much light came out of the temple on the evening before. Now, Jesus, he left. He went to the Mount of Olives. You know, he was out of there. That's what we have in verse 1, chapter 8, verse 1. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Now, early in the morning, he came again into the temple. So he went out of town in an abstract sense. He just went over to the other hill. And they ignited the lampstands, and this would be a pleasant sight. The light will have illuminated the entire community of Jerusalem. All right, this is the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. Everyone in Israel, or their representatives, are there. And it is now, this is also can be considered to be an announcement that the festival is over. You all can pack up and go home. All right, but this illumination was so profound that it could be seen from great distances. All right, I mean, miles and miles. And the expression was that this was a way of stating that the temple of God, the priesthood there in the temple, all right, and the operations of everything that's happening there, the Sanhedrin and their role as the leaders there in the community, that they were the light of the world. This was the phrase that was used, that they considered themselves to be the light of the world. Okay, now this would be hard to argue with that evening. Okay, it would be a little difficult. So I can understand a little bit more why Jesus would just go over to the next hill, just go to the Mount of Olives and wait this out. All right, because if he went in there the night before and he says, "I am the light of the world," it's going to be difficult for people to grasp that, because they're going to be so enamored and so excited about the illumination that's coming out of the temple. This is the next day, all right? This is the next day. And this is when the lights are out, okay? The lights went out. And this evening, the evening that's coming up for the people at this time, they're not going to light these lampstands anymore. They're going to put these away. All right, these go in the storage room until next year. And any oil left over, I don't know what happened to that. But this was the time for Jesus to show up and say, "All right, you guys had your fireworks," if I may use that expression. So it's over. And now what have you got? All right, you just had your moment. There it was. And now the lights are out. So who's left? Jesus. He says, "I am the light of the world." Okay, I am the light of the world. That's how that would have been understood. Okay, he who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. Now there are there are two ways to capture this. The first way is to think about this from a physical point of view of what it means to walk in your daily life, to actually live your life, and then the spiritual point of view. All right, and I'm going to have to try to separate the two because it's a little bit too much to try to deal with it all at the same time. Let's start with the physical point of view. This is something that people can generally get in touch with. Okay, now there are many ways, of course, for people to describe what it means to live. What does it mean to live your life? What does it mean to walk in life? What does that really represent? Okay, well, one of the ways that I think is helpful for a lot of people to define this, one of the ways to define this is to say that life is about solving a set of problems. Okay, that's a pretty good way of starting to build a definition of what does life really represent. You're going to solve a set of problems. Okay, I'll give you an example. For a bird, a bird in a nest. If a bird is hatched out of an egg, this bird is going to have to learn how to solve a certain set of problems. Okay, this bird is going to need to have shelter to a certain extent. They're going to have some food, all right? And the bird is also going to have to learn how to fly. These are some basic problems that this bird is going to have to solve. Or they could very well have some serious problems in their life, all right? If they don't solve this, they're going to have a life of, if I may use this word abstractly, a life of darkness, right? If they don't solve this. Now, being so young, their parents, the mama bird, the daddy bird, they will solve these basic problems for the little birds. Okay, they'll provide them with food. They'll help protect them to an extent with shelter, and they will give them what they need, so they don't have to learn how to fly right away. All right, but eventually they're going to have to learn how to fly. In fact, there are some birds who will kick their little birds out of the nest, and that is how they will learn how to fly. All right, and there's a lot of birds who will not leave that nest, and they'll be forced out. They'll just be kicked out of the nest. And at that point, it's either fly or hit the ground. And of course, if you hit the ground, then, well, this isn't going to work out so well for you. But don't worry, because God has programmed instinct within these birds such that they will begin to flap their wings with all kinds of excitement. And they will fly, all right? So this works out well for birds. But they stay in the nest until they're able to solve the problem of falling, all right? Or their parents will remove them, and then their parents will force them to solve the problem of falling. Okay, and so that's a simple way to understand what life is like. Now, for us, there's a lot more complexity, of course, that goes on with that, because we don't have instinct like the animals have that governs our soul, that governs our body. We have a spirit that governs our soul and governs our body. Our design is different from the animals. So the way that we deal with the physical problems of life is just simply different. Now let me go back to the Garden of Eden. And when Adam and Eve were removed from the Garden of Eden, now they've got some new problems to solve themselves, just to move from the animals to the people, to give you a general idea of what it means to live life and the kinds of problems that we have to solve. All right, now in this case, they would discover that they are going to have a new problem, and that problem is going to be hunger. All right, when they were removed from the garden, they were then introduced to a new problem, and that was hunger. Now, this was a new problem in the sense that now they're going to have to provide themselves with their own food. Before that, everything was available in the garden that God had provided for them. But now, if they want to solve the problem of hunger, they're going to have to grow their own food. All right? And this was the curse that God gave to Adam. You're going to have to work the ground. And because of the physiological changes, it's good to get that kind of exercise. It maintains your health. All right? And so they proceeded. They proceeded to solve the problem of hunger by doing work. Okay? And this is a unique opportunity to understand how a lot of problems are solved. All right? Now, Adam and Eve, they're going to get hungry a lot sooner than the plants are going to be ready for them to eat. So they're going to have to go out and forage. They're going to have to they would have to go out and do some other things real fast in order to try to solve this problem while they are working the ground and while they are waiting for these plants to grow. And then they're going to have to harvest these plants. And then they're going to have to do all the food processing. I mean, there is a lot of work involved in feeding yourself, just in getting food. There's a tremendous amount of work involved, and it is something that happens over an extended period of time. Months and months, sometimes a year, and then years of planning. There's a lot to do just in order to solve the problem of hunger. And you've got to do this, you got to do this initially without any quick return, without any fast reward. Some of the plants can sprout up and they'll be small, and after 10 days or 14 days, you can harvest those, and that's not as bad as waiting for several months. But folks, this is the kind of thing that you need to think about. All right, if you're going to understand what it means to walk in darkness or walk in light in a physical sense, from a physical point of view, that you've got to solve certain problems of life. There's food, there's energy, there's shelter. There's a lot to deal with. And in this case, it's helpful to see this from the perspective that you're going to have to do a lot of work up front without getting much of a return right away. It's going to show up later, after a significant period of time. All right? And what this means is that you're going to have a lot of discomfort. You're going to feel uncomfortable. All right? And this is what it takes. You're going to have some pain. Okay? Especially if you got bad knees, you're going to get on the ground and you're going to be working the ground. Okay? I mean, there's going to be some pain and some suffering. All right? In order to engage in this kind of work so that you can have the benefit later on. So what people have to overcome is the pain and the suffering that you're going to have to endure in order to have a better quality of life in the future. And if you don't, well, there's different ways that people solve this problem. For example, there are a lot of people who will intentionally decide not to engage in, not to embrace the suffering and the pain involved because they have someone in their life who they will extort. All right? They will extort them. And the most common way of people using extortion is they say, you are a good person. And I am suffering, and so because you have such an abundance, you have so much more than what you need, then you have to give me what I need, or you are a bad person. All right? So you either give me your food or I'm going to hurt you by saying that you are evil. That's extortion. All right? Give me what I want or I will hurt you. And this is just one of those subtle ways that people engage in extortion. And this will usually work for a while, until the person who's being extorted finally just gets tired of it and says, that's enough. And then the person has to go find someone else to extort, and hopefully, or not, hopefully they'll have to find someone before they get hungry. All right, and this is how people live, okay? It just is. This is how a lot of people get through life, at least for a while, and then who knows what happens later. There's all kinds of distortions that happen because of other aspects of civilization. All right, but my point is to say that you have to embrace the suffering. You have to embrace the difficulties. You have to embrace the challenges. You have to do that which is hard so that your life will be easier later. So your life will be better much later. All right, if you do what's easy first, your life will get harder. Okay, it'll be more difficult later on. And so when people walk in darkness from a physical point of view, this is one of the ways to understand this. That they are walking in darkness in the sense that they are not embracing the difficulties and the sufferings of life. That's a way to understand walking in darkness from a physical point of view. Walking in darkness from a physical point of view is living your daily life without embracing the difficulties and the sufferings and the challenges and the obstacles and the problems of life. That's walking in darkness. Another way to state this is to say that is walking in the denial of reality. All right? To walk in the denial of reality, because you're going to solve these problems by extorting someone later on. All right? By living in the denial of reality, that is living in the denial of truth. All right? And that is a form of darkness. So when it comes to living by the flesh, all right, people will often define their lives by, they will live their lives trying to have the maximum amount of comfort and reduce as much as possible any discomfort. Or they will maximize pleasure and minimize pain. Those are some basic ways of thinking about it. But through doing this, they are walking in darkness. They are going to walk in a denial of reality. All right? That is a form of walking in darkness from a physical point of view. And later on, there will be an illumination. Okay? There will be an illumination that takes place depending upon the distortions in civilization. But in general, there will be an illumination, and then they will have to endure the way things are later on. Now, from a spiritual point of view, there are other kinds of problems. Just as there is physical hunger, where you can understand that there is the absence of food, okay? The absence of food in your stomach, right? And there's also a spiritual set of problems to solve because there is an absence of other things. All right? You have an absence of love. You have an absence of acceptance. You have an absence of meaning and understanding and purpose in life. Okay? And these are spiritual needs that have to do with a spiritual emptiness that needs to be fulfilled. Now, from a physical point of view, I gave you the example using food, all right, because that tends to be a little bit more immediate. But let's consider one of the other topics that I mentioned, energy. Energy is an important problem to solve as well. For example, there is a need for energy in people's lives, and one of the ways that people will recognize this is when the lights go out, all right? When the power goes down. If you live in a community that depends on the grid, the power grid, if your home, if the way that you live your life depends on the electricity that you are connected to the power generators and the power plants in your community, you know what happens when something goes wrong. With the power lines, either because somebody steals some cable or because a transformer fails, it could just blow up or who knows what. Or there's a car accident that knocks out a pole. There are lots of ways that the power can go down. Or in some countries, they just don't have the means to run the power plant as much as the people would like. And so they have periodic shutdowns, where they will shut down the facility for an hour or two or maybe 6 hours or so during the day because they just don't have enough fuel to be able to meet the needs that the population is wanting. And so they just shut it down, because they can't do it. All right? That's a way of understanding what it means when the lights go out, okay? You have to have energy if you're going to enjoy the quality of life that you probably like to have. And just as the temple compound will be dark later on in the evening, okay? It's coming. The ceremony of the lights happened the night before, but that's not the way it's going to be this evening. It's not going to be this way for another year, all right, until they have the next ceremony of the lights. The lights are going to go out. So also, when people do not address the need, the physical need for power, for energy, for the electricity, the lights at some point will go out. And if you don't produce your own, if you have no way of producing your own, then you're just going to have to do without. You will do without. And you will be in darkness. All right? You have a need for light from a physical point of view, but you are going to go without, and you will be in darkness. From a spiritual point of view, all right, everyone who does not know their God is already walking in darkness. From a physical point of view, depending upon what's going on in your life, from a physical point of view, you may have the illumination from the energy that you have, and occasionally you do without, and you walk in darkness. All right? But from a spiritual point of view, you're always in darkness. And people have no idea what it's like to walk in the light of God. They have no idea. No concept of that at all. They just can't even compare it. Right? If you could imagine what it may be like if you had no electricity and no means of producing any light when the sun went down. Okay? If when the sun went down, it was dark and that's all you've got. You might get the moonlight on occasion, reflected a reflection from the sun from another location from where it may be positioned. Occasions like that, you can get a little bit of moonlight. But in general, if that was your way of life, then you would know what it was like to walk in darkness. Okay, and you can make a comparison between the two. But when you do not know your God and you are constantly walking in darkness, you don't know what it's like to walk in the light of God. You have no way of knowing, no way of even comprehending. But this is a problem to solve, just as there are physical problems to solve. To walk in life, there are simple, fundamental, physical problems that you need to solve. All right? So also, if you want to walk in life and walk well, there are spiritual problems to solve. Okay, so there are physical problems to solve and there are spiritual problems to solve. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who never even figure out how to solve the physical problems of life very well. Instead, they find ways of living off of the solutions of other people. All right? That can be very unreliable, unstable, and there can be complications and issues about that. So I'd like to encourage you, of course, to spend some time out of your life learning how to be a little bit more resilient and a little bit more capable of providing the things that you need in order to sustain your life when others may fail to do that for you. But when it comes to the spiritual needs of life, this is another set of problems. And there definitely is no one who can solve these problems for you. All right? No one. I cannot solve these problems for you. I can tell you where you can find the solutions, but I can't solve them. You're not, giving you an example, you're not going to be able to take from my relationship with God and enjoy the benefits of my relationship with Him for yourself. That's just not going to happen. All right, this is not going to work. You are going to have your own personal relationship with God, or you will remain in darkness. All right? And when people have no idea what it is to live in the light of God, then they don't even know in general that they are living in darkness. Okay? Now, some of you were saying praise Jesus when you were shortly after you were first born, maybe before you turned the age of 2, all right? But there are others like myself who came to know the Lord Jesus later in life. I came to know Him later in life. I had a lot of time, plenty of time, to live for the purpose of maximizing pleasure, minimizing pain, increasing comfort, trying to decrease comfort as much as possible. All right, living for the indulgence of the flesh instead of the restraint of the flesh, and then I had some time of living for the restraint of the flesh, and well, that didn't work either. All right, I know what it's like to live without Jesus. Okay, as an adult, okay, on my own, without living on, without being dependent on other people, I knew what it was like to live life without any light of God whatsoever. And so I know what it means to live in darkness without Jesus from a spiritual point of view. And I have memories. I do. I have memories of living my days with the emptiness inside. Living my days without without what my spirit genuinely needed. As a result, just like when you have hunger, you look for something to put in your stomach, so also when you have the emptiness in the spirit, you look for ways to fill it. And I look for a lot of ways to fill the deepest needs of my heart in the world, all right, which God did not design to meet that purpose. But I tried, and the world in many ways advertised different ways that I might have those needs met. But no matter what I did, how I did it, what I engaged in, what I did not engage in, all right, those needs were never met. I still walked in darkness, either through the indulgence of the flesh or the restraint of the flesh. Both were still filled with a life of absolute darkness. Now, living a life in the restraint of the flesh, you're given the promise that you will walk in the light of God. But of course, it doesn't happen. It's just a big lie. There's a hope. We have hope that it will work, but it doesn't. And of course, if you don't believe me, that's fine. You just keep at it for a while longer. All right? And I think it's just a matter of time before you realize what I'm saying. Okay? So take your time with that. No need to rush. But as for myself, I could tell that there was nothing there. Eventually, I recognized that there was a problem between myself and God. Like I said, life can be described as solving a set of problems. And this was a problem that I discovered. I discovered that I was spiritually dead. All right, that's what I discovered. It's in the scriptures. You are born into this world spiritually dead without the life of God within you. And you need to be born again. You need the Spirit of life within you. You need the Holy Spirit of God to be within your spirit. That is a problem that needs to be solved. God has provided a solution for this, but until a person is willing to surrender to His terms concerning this, they're not going to get it. You're going to remain dead. So I surrendered. And I accepted that this is the way that things are. And then I had no idea what to do from there. I had no idea. And I will never forget when I prayed, I said, God, I have no idea what to do from here. I have no idea what to do next. And so I'm not going to do anything. I will do nothing until you show me how this is going to work. All right, it's all on you. I'm going to wait. Now, I still took care of the fundamental problems of life. I still solved the physical problems of life. I brushed my teeth. I went to bed. I put food in my stomach. I worked. There's lots of things you can do. But when it comes to the spiritual needs, I didn't understand what that meant until I lived my life on a daily basis, continually, with the basic fundamental truths that I knew. And the basic fundamental truth that I started with was, I am forgiven. All right? Now, that's a big obstacle for a lot of people to get past. Just to accept that Jesus died for all of your sins, your God does not hold your sins against you anymore. That's tough, all right? That is really hard for people to accept for some reason. Okay? But I accepted that, and over a period of time, walking in my daily life with that small little light that I had, okay, I had something to work with, and that had a profound impact on my life. Okay? Now, from there, I embraced other truths. And every truth can be described, if I was to use the illustration of the lighting of the lampstands in the temple, every little truth can be described as a wick that is being ignited. That's a way that I usually think about it personally. Every small little truth is another wick that gets ignited. And so over time, more and more there will be greater and greater illumination. Okay? And that is what it means to walk in the light. To walk in the truth. To walk in what we have in Christ, what he has given to us, and how that might be applied in our daily lives, in the unique circumstances that we have in our life as we are solving the physical problems of life and we are solving the spiritual problems of life. We solve the physical problems of life, as an example, by filling our stomach with food. We solve the spiritual problems of life by filling our hearts with the truth of the love of God. All right? So when he says, I am the light of the world, that's what it means to me. And he goes on, he who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. And after all that I've said, I think that second statement that he makes there will have more meaning about what it means to not walk in darkness, but to have the light of life. One wick at a time. Okay? Moving to the next verse, verse 13. The Pharisees therefore said to him, you bear witness of yourself. Your witness is not true. All right, now there are people like this, okay? There are people like this. I call this the courtroom mentality. That's what I call this. The courtroom mentality. The only thing that exists for people like this is who's going to win in the courtroom. That is so lame, all right? That is so weak. That is so pathetic. I'll use the word pathetic, all right? How you win in the courtroom has nothing to do with what really happens in daily life and what really happens in solving the real fundamental problems of life. I mean, certainly there can be some interference, okay? But in reality, in the midst of that interference, you're still not going to really be able to get away from the fact that there are problems that will either be solved or they won't be solved. But this is how people think. When it comes to, you probably have encountered having discussions with people about something that's true. This is true. You know it is. And it's just so obvious. You can't really prove it, and a courtroom may not even be interested in hearing it. And even if you went into a courtroom, you may not be able to prove it to the courtroom, but it's still true. And you try to convince these people that it is, and they won't care. All right? They don't care. They don't want to hear it. Because the only thing that matters to them is what will be declared by a judge in a courtroom. That's all they care about. And whoever has the power of enforcement is the one who defines truth. That's how people are. People think that the only truth that exists is what gets defined by enforcement. And this gets established in a courtroom by a judge, where a judge orders that this will be the willful voluntary behavior, or there will be these consequences. That's how that works. All right? And so they say that truth is defined by the courtroom, whatever gets ordered by force. Jesus is the one who will give the final judgment. He will do that. And when you realize that he puts you in hell, you're going to see the power of enforcement. All right? You're going to see that. Absolutely. But between now and then, his interest is defining a relationship. That's what he wants. He wants a relationship. And relationships can be defined by courtrooms, by decree, by force. All right? But these relationships are not healthy relationships. They just aren't. Never will be. All right? You can't force someone into a healthy relationship. When you force someone into a relationship, it is by definition an unhealthy relationship. All right? But this is how people are thinking. They are thinking with this courtroom mentality. And this is how they respond to Jesus. All right? Truth is not about what's true. It's about whatever can be proved. Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And they say, you bear witness of yourself. Whatever you say is not true. Because you need to have other witnesses for it to be true. Well, with a courtroom mentality, sure. But if you want to live in reality, okay, if you want to live in the light, if I may use that abstraction, you're going to have to separate yourself from the courtroom mentality. There's just no way around it. All right? You're going to have to live on the basis of what really is true, regardless of whether something can be proven or not proven. Jesus is not going to prove that he's the light of the world. All right? But, in fact, he already has witnesses. He did. This was established in John chapter 5. I spoke about this in the previous messages. John chapter 5. I made some notes. Verse 31, he was relying on witnesses. In verse 33, John chapter 5, verse 33, he has the witness of John the Baptist. In verse 36, he has the witness of his works. In verse 37, he had the witness of the Father. And in verse 39, he had the witness of the Scriptures. This was the healing of the man at the pool of Bethesda. He had plenty of witnesses already. It's just this brief moment when he says he's the light of the world. They say, you bear witness of yourself. Your witness is invalid. It doesn't mean anything. Well, it does, because it's still the truth. And it still is going to matter. It will. They will continually walk in darkness, but those who believe the truth will walk in the light. And that matters. And when they are physically dead, they are going to remain in darkness. And when those who are physically dead, when those who are physically dead and the judgment happens, if they have been born again by the Spirit, they are going to continue, and they have been walking in the light of God, they're going to continue to walk in the light of the kingdom of heaven. And you think that the ceremony of the lights the night before was impressive? You think that was impressive? Yeah. Well, the light coming that's going to be emanating from the kingdom of heaven will be greater than you can possibly imagine. All right? So Jesus answered, because we're not done yet. Verse 14, Jesus answered and said to them, even if I bear witness of myself, my witness is true, for I know where I came from and where I am going. But you do not know where I come from and where I am going. All right? Now, sometimes he would say, you know where I am from, because they did know from a physical point of view. From a physical point of view, they knew exactly where he was from. All right? Even in the temple records, they know where he was born, that he was born in Bethlehem. They knew he was from out of town. He was from Nazareth. They knew that. They could figure that out. They could just ask around, They knew where he was from, right? And they had a pretty good idea about where he was going from a physical point of view as well. But from a spiritual point of view, they did not know where he was from. They did not know that he was from the kingdom of heaven. They did not know that he was God manifested in the flesh. They didn't know where he was from in that sense. And they definitely did not know where he was going from a spiritual point of view, because they didn't know that place. And they're not going to know that place. That place is in the light, and they are in darkness. They are in so much darkness they can't even comprehend what it means to walk in light. To them, walking in darkness is normal, because it is for them. Verse 15, you judge according to the flesh. I judge no one. Yet if I do judge, my judgment is true. For I am not alone, but I am with the Father who sent me. All right, now he says he doesn't judge anyone, but if he does judge, well, and that later on he is going to judge. How do we get past this, right? Because there seems to be a contradiction. If he says he doesn't judge anybody, but then later on he does judge, how does that work? The way that it works is that he simply reports and makes a decision on the truth. In this abstraction, the Father, all right, him as when he functions as the living God of the universe, he defines what is good and what is evil, what is right, what is wrong. He defines what the relationship will be with him. He's the one who defines the covenants. All right? Jesus, in his capacity, when God manifested in the flesh as a person to live in this way, he didn't come to define covenants. He didn't come to define what is good and evil. He didn't come to define law. He came to execute the law. All right? That's it. So when he issues judgment, it's just going to simply be on the basis of, look, I am just reporting that this is what God has declared. This is what he said. This is the decision. It's already been made. That's what it means to say that Jesus is not a judge, but he is a judge. He's a judge in the sense that he will execute the laws that God has already defined. He is not a judge in the sense that he does not need to define laws or pass judgment or anything like that. He's just like that. In this sense, he's just simply following through with what God has already judged, with what God has already defined. Okay? So that's just an abstraction. So again, in verse 15, you judge according to the flesh. And that's what they were doing. That's what they were trying to accomplish. With the conflict over the woman who was caught in adultery, that's a role that they would have within the society. Their role in society was that they would deal with the issues related to the flesh. But Jesus is there to deal with the issues of the heart, with the issues of the spirit, with the issues of the soul. Those are the issues that he is really going to be addressing. So they will judge according to the flesh. I judge no one, in the sense that there's really no need for him to address the issues of the flesh, and there is no need for him to establish or define laws. All right, all he's going to do is recognize the way things already are. All right, so as a judge, Jesus will just simply acknowledge the way things are, not make a declaration of the way things are or the way things will be. It will be a legitimate, truthful acknowledgement of the way things really are. And yet, in verse 16, and yet if I do judge, my judgment is true, for I am not alone, I am with the Father who sent me. That's what he means when he says, I am not alone, I'm with the Father who sent me, and his judgment will just simply be an acknowledgement of the truth, an acknowledgement of reality. All right, now I did fail to write my question on this page. I think I might have it in my notes over there. And so I don't recall what I had jotted down as a question for you guys to have within your small groups. And so I'll just come up with one right now. I think that a good question would be for a discussion of how would you compare your life in darkness with your light in life? What is unique for you? What is special to you that you could say, before I was in darkness, now I have a little bit of light, maybe just one wick, or 3 wicks, whatever it may be. But it's just a little bit that makes it real to you to understand the differences between walking in darkness and walking in light. Okay, let's pray. Dear God, thank you for all the truth that you have revealed to us. And Lord, I do pray that we will respond more, that we will believe more of what you say, of what you see, so that we can walk in your light and walk in reality. And I pray that you will show us more and more that we will believe more and more so that we can have an increase in the illumination that you have for us, so that we are no longer walking in so much darkness, but we are walking in the light that you provide. And I pray for this in Jesus' name. Amen.